Good morning and welcome to another OC Tax Talk. It is Monday. We have a little change in our programming, but I'm actually really excited about this because today, rather than Todd Ahmet from the Anaheim Chamber, I get to speak with my very good friend, Councilman Trevor O'Neill from the city of Anaheim. Trevor, thank you for coming last minute and for joining us today. I'm so happy to speak with you.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
It's been a long time since we've had this kind of chat since we served on the chamber together here in Orange.
Yes.
So I know that you have a lot on your plate in Anaheim. So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about just your role in the city and just some of the exciting things that are happening before we dive into we have lots of questions. There's so much happening in Anaheim.
There is, and in these challenging times, it's hard to keep in perspective the exciting things that are happening. But yes, there is a lot going on. So just briefly, for those who may not know, I was elected to the Anaheim City Council in 2018, representing District 6, which is essentially Anaheim Hills. So I'm the first district representative for that area. My priorities have always been being a fiscal hawk and making sure that our money is well spent, that we want to promote economic development and bring in as much out-of-town revenue as we can to support our city services and make sure that Anaheim residents have a high quality of life.
Now, obviously, you mentioned challenging times, which we can't go anywhere else before we talk about that. Anaheim has really been a hotspot in the county. How are you all focused on that and dealing with that particular situation right now with coronavirus?
The biggest impact that we've had is economic. The resort area has all but shut down. Tourism has just dropped off the map as of late March. I have several hotel friends who tell me that they saw their occupancy rates go from 95%, we were at record highs, down to 5% the next day. And so it has been really challenging on our budget. A good portion of Anaheim's revenue comes in from the resort district, and we're heavily reliant on the bed tax, the hotel tax from that area. And that revenue stream just being shut off has put us in a situation where we're looking at, in this next budget cycle, about a $75 million budget gap. And so we have some tough decisions to make. We've made some tough decisions already and a long way to go, but I'm committed to making sure that we can move towards a safe and swift reopening as soon as we can and get that sector of our economy moving again.
Now, we've already seen some of that because downtown Disney is now slowly reopening and starting to gain some momentum. Anything particular you're seeing or learning from that reopening?
Well, it's great that downtown Disney has reopened. Downtown Disney doesn't bring in tourists from out of town to fill hotel beds, but it has had an impact on our sales tax. I know Disney has had to kind of readjust a couple of things. This is all a work in progress for everyone, right? But I'm really encouraged by how things have been going so far and hope that we can stay the course and continue down that path.
So, and it's not just, it's the tourism, it's obviously the Disneyland park, but I think people sometimes forget about how much we have coming through the convention center as well, that's a big part of the puzzle.
It is. They all kind of work together.
Absolutely.
Part of what brings in large conventions from across the country is having the Disneyland Resort right next door, being in Southern California where everybody wants to be with all the amenities that we have within such a close proximity. And yes, convention business has been shut off as well, and so that's been challenging too. Realizing that is an integral part of our local economy, early on during the pandemic and the shutdown, the City Council allocated some convention center reserve funds to help prop up our tourism bureau, Visit Anaheim, which is responsible for booking all of those conventions. Visit Anaheim's budget, a lot of people may not understand, is funded through a portion of the hotel bed tax. And so when we have no hotel bed tax, Visit Anaheim has no budget at all. And so that additional monies that we've dedicated to help them has allowed them to have a skeleton crew to continue to operate, rebooking conventions for times into the future and making sure that when we are ready to reopen, we hit the ground running and we get back on track as smoothly as possible.
And communicating with all those folks who are trying to rebook and reschedule. I mean, that's a big part of it, keeping them up to date as well.
Indeed.
But I think that there was some early criticism where people just didn't understand that those monies weren't coming from the general fund, taking away necessarily from residents, but that they were funded actually by the organizations that support all that.
Exactly, from the Convention Center Reserve Fund. And not only that, Ariana, but the CARES Act that the federal government has passed will help reimburse cities for coronavirus-related expenses.
That's
and
right.
We have asked for that portion to be reimbursed, and it looks like we're going to get it.
Oh, that's great. So with that, I mean, obviously, again, with the numbers being higher in Anaheim than they are in some of the other places, Anaheim's taken a lot of big efforts to try and help residents and be there for the residents. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing?
Sure. And it's not surprising that Anaheim's test numbers and positive numbers have been higher. We're the largest city in Orange County, so we expected that. And we have many areas of town where there's more dense living than in some other cities. If you, for instance, took my district out of the equation in Anaheim Hills, our numbers are actually very, very low.
Right.
But it's more open space, more suburban area, and less dense living. But yes, we have many residents that have been impacted, whether it be through job losses or other economic situations, the whole stay-at-home orders, and so we want to make sure that our residents weren't left behind. So part of our economic stimulus and recovery package was dedicating several $1 million, $15 million in total that we dedicated both to economic recovery, but for residents as well. And this has gone to things like supporting our nonprofits who are doing all of the food drives that you have in town, rental assistance programs for people in need, senior support services, more augmented homeless services. So we're at the point now where I believe we're in the $7 to $8 million range of money that we have dedicated directly to resident assistance, and that as well will be reimbursed through the federal funding in the CARES Act.
So with all of this going on, you must be very busy lately.
Yes, indeed.
There's a lot happening all at one time.
Yes.
And we've seen obviously all across the county with the kind of arguing back and forth about mask orders. How do you reconcile that within the city and just helping keeping people safe?
Well, we have to remember that it is the state government that promulgates those regulations along with the county, and so we don't have any of our own independent ordinances related to masks or distancing or that sort of thing. We're following the guidance put forth by the state and the county. I will caution some cities who go against what the state and the county are asking, as the governor has made it clear in his budget, that if you do not adhere to all of the state guidelines, then you run the risk of not receiving any CARES Act funding.
Which could be very dangerous when there's so many different areas that could affect.
Yeah. But it is a balancing act that has to be done, and we want to make sure that businesses have the flexibility to operate, but that they are able to, that they must do so within the county and the state guidelines, doing as much as we can to preserve everyone's individual liberties.
So let's talk about business, because that, especially for small businesses, and Anaheim has, it's overshadowed by the resort area, but there are a lot of small businesses in Anaheim. What is the city doing, or what would you like to see the city do more of even to help small businesses in Anaheim?
Well, part of our $15 million allocation several months ago was for small business assistance, and we were providing loans for micro businesses. And we are developing and will soon be ready to launch a small business promotional program for Shop, Dine, Local.
Oh, wonderful.
That has been recently augmented through some county funding that we received. Now, in my district specifically, District 6 in Anaheim, which is part of the 3rd supervisorial district, Supervisor Don Wagner was able to obtain $1.8 million in funding from the CARES Act to go to his portion of Anaheim.
I forget that you're split sometimes.
Right,
so.
but interestingly, District 6 is almost entirely, or it is entirely contained within District 3, and there's very little outside of the Anaheim District 6 that also falls into District 3. So the third supervisorial district and the sixth city council district are essentially the same.
And they're doing it very differently.
They are. And so the money that we got for the third district went directly to the city for small business assistance. And so what we were able to do with that $1.8 million is first take the businesses within my district that had received the micro loans, and we were able to convert those into grants. Okay. So that's a $10,000 grant that those businesses are now receiving. The money that we had initially dedicated was finite, and we had to distribute that from a lottery. And there were several businesses in my district that did not win in the lottery. And so we were able to then capture all of those other businesses who did not receive the micro loan, and we have now given them a grant too. Even after that, we still have about $1 million left over specifically for businesses in my district for additional grants. And so the application period for that is going to be opening, I believe, later on this week. We were working with the Small Business Development Center to get that program up to date and ready to launch. Very different, though, as you had earlier mentioned, about money that's going to other parts of Anaheim. Anaheim is split between the third and the fourth supervisorial district, and my district is the only one really that has the third. The rest of it is the fourth. And that money is being distributed for the same types of small business programs, but through the county rather than the city directly. We're really thankful to Don Wagner for his leadership in making sure that we had that money directly ourselves, because we know where it's best spent within our own district.
And my understanding, the money that is being allocated from the county for the third was focused more on nonprofits, if I remember correctly from the press release that went out.
No, specifically for small businesses.
It still was small business.
Yes.
That's good. Okay. Yeah. So everybody gets a chance at something.
Right.
So, because I know so many are suffering. What are you hearing mostly from the small businesses in your area?
Well, I'm a small business owner myself, and so I feel the same types of pressures and strains. And, you know, when the government tells you you can't operate your business, you still have bills to pay.
Absolutely.
You still have the rent, you have utilities, you try to keep your employees on payroll if you can. Yes, there are federal programs, and Anaheim has really led the way in assisting and guiding those kind of businesses in partnership with Visit Anaheim and the Chamber of Commerce, making sure that our business community has those resources available. But it is a challenge, and we all want to get back to work, and we all want to reopen, but we all want to do so as safely as possible so we're not put back in this position again where we have to scale back.
Now, from the small business to the very big businesses, you have two very large businesses who are contemplating some really imaginative changes for Anaheim. So we have the Anaheim Ducks and we have the Angels. And for both of them, development plans are coming forward, are now being shown to the residents and to the county, because this is going to become not like LA Live, it's going to be Orange County Live. It's going to be a new downtown for Orange. Talk to me a little bit about those plans, because it's really exciting and something nice to look forward to, honestly.
This is LA Live on steroids.
Yes, I think that's a great way to put it.
And, you know, despite the issues with the teams themselves and the baseball season having just started in abbreviated form and hockey season not happening at all, we are really, really excited that both teams are moving forward with their plans for economic development. You know, over the last few years, we've engaged in purchase and sale agreements with both teams and the land that's surrounding both Angel Stadium and the Honda Center. And in the case of Angel Stadium, the stadium itself. And despite the issues that professional sports are going through, and despite the economic shutdown, both teams have been moving forward diligently with their economic development plans. And we're expecting $1 to $2 billion in economic activity and development to happen on those parcels of land there, and really just lifting up the Platinum Triangle, helping it realize the vision that was always planned for it. And not only that, the jobs that we're creating, and we're anticipating tens of millions of dollars a year in new annual tax revenues coming into the city. So we are really excited about what's in store there.
And I apologize, I've not done my homework on, there's residential included in all of this too. How many new actual units of housing are expected between the two projects? If you know that off the top
I don't
of
know
your
the
head.
number off the top of my head, but I do know that there are several thousand between them,
Right.
and that both teams have incorporated residential into their development plans, along with other mixed-use retail, office, hotels,
Right.
a lot of public spaces, outdoor entertainment options, parks. So it's really going to just be such a great asset to the community, and hopefully the new downtown for all of Orange County.
And I'm sure Sacramento is very happy that it's all transit oriented, because it's all right there on the hub of Arctic, which means buses, trains, all kinds of transportation options right there, which I was not probably necessarily the intention, but it is a whole new way of living right in that area.
It is, and that was part of the intention. It always has been. The wheels of government move slowly, and what was envisioned many, many years ago for
20 years
Arctic
ago, I think, for
has
Arctic,
taken a long time to really come into being. But it was always intended to be this hub of connectivity for everything from the convention center, the resort, and the Platinum Triangle, and we're really pleased to see all of this finally coming together into fruition.
And now, the bottom line also for all this, especially where Anaheim Stadium is concerned, is that the city will no longer be the owner and the manager of that particular facility.
Right.
That will finally be taken off of your plate, and you'll just be able to focus on policy for the area and for growth, right?
Right, and that's the best way to do it. I never thought that the city should be in the business of owning the stadium in the first place. So we're really optimistic that the team and Artie Moreno will either renovate the stadium, bring it up to 21st century standards, and potentially even build a new stadium.
I've seen some of like the vision for that. It's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
It's really exciting. And as your neighbor at Orange, just knowing that that's right on our border,
right
right there,
the river,
right across the river, I think we'll have to work really hard to work together on that, because it could just be a boon for the whole north of Orange County. It'll be amazing.
You hear that, Orange City Council? Pressure's on you.
So now, one of the things that have come up, because I know that it's sometimes a little push-pull on your council. You have some distinct voices on your council. Recently, at a recent meeting, there was a call for, well, this wasn't a new call, it's come before, for a gate tax. They always focus on Disneyland, obviously, but that would affect not just Disneyland. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, look, Ariana.
I'm sorry.
We're facing a budget gap because of the shutdown in the resort. The last thing that we want to do is tax the resort to try to close that budget gap. That is just not the right way to go about it. Every tax ends up getting passed on to consumers in one form or another, and taxing the resort through a gate tax, it's the wrong way to go about it. A lot of people don't understand also that it's not just out-of-town guests who would be subject to that.
Exactly.
But everybody. So this would affect Anaheim residents as well. It'll actually slow the economic recovery of that area. And as you had alluded, you cannot simply single out one entity like Disneyland and say we're only going to tax Disneyland. You'd have to do something like taxing all entertainment venues, and that would include the Angel Stadium, the Honda Center, the Grove concert venue. All of those would be subject to this same kind of tax. And those are community amenities, and tens of thousands of people from Anaheim and surrounding areas in Orange County frequent those types of places and will be subject to that tax as well. So that would only serve to discourage people from continuing to use those venues with the same level of frequency. It's just not something that nor I believe this council is supportive of doing.
And I would imagine too that people don't understand that when with that blanket of entertainment, you're also talking about your movie theater tickets, going to the bowling alley, things that locals use and are usually smaller, smaller businesses that really cannot afford anything new like that on them. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you focusing on that and just kind of setting the record straight on that. So I'm going to take a little break here because I do want to tell all of our audience who is watching us, as a reminder, always, if you have a question for the councilman that you'd like to put him on the hot seat with, please leave your question in the comments section below on this feed, and we will happily try to get as many as we can presented to Trevor and see what he has to say. But with that, I will turn back to our questions because, again, there's so much to talk about when we talk about Anaheim. So with the going back to Disneyland for just a second.
Okay.
So largest employer, not just in Anaheim, but the whole county. So I think the last count before all this was, if I'm remembering correctly, about 30,000 plus employees all in. So, but with the park we're projecting to remain closed, that's a huge loss just in people having jobs and being at work, and then the revenue stream you've already talked about. Do you see that in that those closures not only affecting unemployment but also continued sales tax revenue? Like, how do you account for that going forward?
Well, it's short term. We know that things will bounce back, but it will take time. There's the immediate concerns of what that's doing to our current budget cycle that we have to deal with. And it's not so much sales tax. Yes, we've taken a hit on sales tax,
Right.
but the bed tax primarily. When you talk about different taxes that fund cities, you have basically three. You have your property tax, your sales tax, and your hotel tax. Now, with property tax and sales tax, everybody's familiar with those.
Right.
You write a check, it goes up to Sacramento, and only a small sliver of that comes down to
Our
where it
favorite term
originated.
being like a donor county.
Orange
So,
County is definitely
yeah.
donor county. What do we get, 6 cents on the dollar for
It's
everything that
incredible.
we send? Okay. So with the bed tax, however, that's something that is completely within each jurisdiction's control. None of that goes to Sacramento. All of it goes to the city coffers. And so our hotel guests are paying a 15% bed tax. And as I had alluded earlier, that revenue stream has just been completely shut off,
Right.
for all intents and purposes. And so that's really where we're taking the big hit. So our budgeting is challenging in the short term here, but we know that it will recover. It'll take a little bit of time to do so, but we'll get there, and we're confident that the economy will bounce back on track.
And I just want to make this note because I know a lot of people get confused about this, that the, loving term for that bed tax, TOT. So, and can you just go ahead and explain for, just be our educator for today, what does TOT stand for?
Transient occupancy tax. And no, that's not taxes that homeless are paying for sleeping in the parks.
Not at all.
That's the tax that hotel guests are paying.
But as someone who sits in many, many city council meetings, you hear TOT all the time, and a lot of times you don't necessarily know what that means.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that is what that equates to.
Right. It's also
Okay.
worth noting that we have a number of short-term rental properties in Anaheim, and they are also paying transient occupancy tax,
Oh,
and that's
okay.
not a small number.
Right. And I know some people were hoping that could become a bigger alternative. So a little tough on neighborhoods, and there's still a lot of talk to be had about that. But
There's a
probably
balance for sure.
There's probably that's
Yeah.
a whole nother show, I am
Yeah.
sure. So, and I know because you've been so involved in Orange that you pay attention to things that are happening. You've probably seen that here in Orange, they've closed down parts of the plaza so that we can have that outdoor dining. Is Anaheim looking at new and innovative, options like that for your businesses and restaurants?
Yeah, and we have.
Okay.
At the very beginning, when we declared the state of emergency back in late March, early April, we gave the city manager's office the latitude to relax those kinds of regulations. So specifically, some things that we've done, we've closed off the Center Street promenade to traffic
Right.
across from City Hall downtown. And so there's a lot of restaurants there that are able to utilize that space. We've allowed restaurants citywide to bring their seating outside into the parking lot areas. So we're relaxing the parking issues, provided, of course, that the property owners or property managers are on board with that. So yes, we're always looking at different ways that we can just not complicate things for businesses who are already struggling.
Are there any other things that you're doing? I know that some cities have looked at reducing fees or doing different types of checks. Are you constantly looking at those, or have you implemented
Always.
any of those?
Yes,
Yeah.
we have delayed several of our fees. Even the transient occupancy tax payment remittance has been delayed, with the understanding that that's a chunk of change that people could use in the short term for their operations to help keep them afloat.
Oh, wonderful. Now we're almost, I can't even believe we have 5 minutes left, which is amazing because I knew it was going to be a nice, friendly chat. It would go fast. It's OC Tax. So, our last questions are always about historic Prop 13. I think I know where you stand on this, but this November, we're going to have, the big opening salvo against Prop 13 with split roll, going after commercial businesses, which almost everything we've talked about today is about commercial businesses,
right.
which is going to be, it's going to be interesting. Would you like to share your views about split roll and, protecting Prop 13?
Absolutely. So split roll, for anyone who may not be completely familiar with it, is pulling commercial properties away from the protections of Prop 13 and reassessing their taxable value every year at the market rate of that property. I had mentioned before, I'm a small business owner and have a commercial property as well. And so this is something that I would personally be affected by,
Right.
and have been watching very closely. So ultimately what ends up happening is if you tax something at a higher rate, you're taxing this commercial property now at market value versus what it was when it was purchased
Right.
with the additional step-ups under Prop 13, huge tax increase.
Right.
Where does that money come from? Well, commercial businesses, commercial properties lease space to small businesses. They produce goods, they provide services, and ultimately that additional cost is going to be passed on to either a tenant
Right.
who is going to see that additional property tax on his rent, and then he's going to have to pass it on to his customer, or ultimately just passed on to the customer directly. Well, in any situation, I suppose, the customer is going to be the one that ends up paying the price. And here again, we are in a pandemic, and it's really challenging economic times, probably the worst recession of our lifetimes that we're going to experience. And the answer to getting us back on track is not raising taxes on everybody. So I am opposed to the split roll. I understand the issue. I'll fight against any changes to the protections of Prop 13.
I think there are a lot of us who will, and I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot more from OC Tax about that. I know for a fact, you'll be hearing a lot more from OC Tax on this. So I appreciate you sharing your views. Is there anything else that, we've just ripped through all the questions. So is there anything else you'd like to add about, some of your initiatives or just anything else that's going on in Anaheim?
Do we have any questions from viewers?
That's a very good one.
If we only have a couple of minutes.
I know we just had the other one that was about the streets closing and doing things for restaurants. I did actually see on Facebook the other day, our good friend Bruno Sorrento had just opened up the White House again with all the outdoor dining, which actually looked like a lovely palazzo. I wanted to get over there because I know his food is so good.
Yes.
But yes, any place that you would recommend, or where you're allowed to call out a favorite? Would that be bad for the councilman?
Go see Bruno. He might still have some of my tomatoes.
That's right. I will end on that because you are a master gardener. For those of you who don't know, Trevor is, I would just say, a absolute true Renaissance man. So I don't think there's much that I've asked or questioned that you haven't been able to do. But you have been going around to restaurants in the city sharing your gardening.
I have a large crop of tomatoes, several hundred this year.
All different types.
All different heirlooms, yes, that I grew from seeds starting in January.
Yes.
And reaping the harvest now.
Yes.
And I've given my bounty to several local restaurants who've then been able to give little free appetizers to their patrons, help draw in business.
Do they actually put your name on it?
They
so
do.
They know?
They
That's
do.
fantastic. And you could go to your Facebook page and see the whole journey of the tomatoes.
Yes,
so if anyone needs to know how to, mature and nurture tomatoes along with a lot of other different fruits and vegetables, you're the guy. Well, thank you. Our 30 minutes is just flown by. So thank you so much, especially for coming in last minute. I appreciate that so much.
Well, you're welcome. It was a pleasure to be here speaking with you today. Glad to help out.
Well, thank you. And for those of you at home, thank you so much once again for joining us. Next week, we will have, I believe we are getting our fearless leader, Carolyn Kvetchy, coming back with us to talk more about Prop 13, protecting Prop 13, and Prop 15, which will be on the ballot. If you have any other further questions, please leave them in the comments section, and please join us again next week. Thank you so much.